Embassy Industrial Parks are our sponsor here today, and we're very pleased to be working with them on the event. We first met Anshul and his team only a few weeks ago, actually, and it almost was a chance meeting, bizarrely in San Diego. But we shared some comments and some views and some aspirations about how we could work with Embassy in helping them access some of the European markets, and also how we in India could sort of work with what is an extraordinary business there and help capitalize on the market that is growing hugely. So, Anshul, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce you and to share some of the those magnificent Indian facts that you're about to impart on us.
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Cushman & Wakefield and all the people who've worked really hard to make sure that our sponsorship money doesn't go to waste. So thank you for that. No, but on a serious note, Rose and Elliot, thank you very much. You've been excellent with our teams back in India, coordinating back and forth. Just a quick one, we've got a small present for everybody in those red bags, so it's worth some money, so please don't leave it around. Before I get started on India, I'd like to just sum up my thoughts on the last session. It's pretty fascinating to see the challenges that we're facing in Europe are so similar in the leasing market in India, especially with industrial and office. Introducing my group, Embassy Group, based out of, we're not the Indian Embassy, just clarifying that. Our company is called the Embassy Group. We are the largest office landlords in the country today. We have a leased and fully managed space of about 3 million square meters in India. These are grade A tenants, mainly your IBMs, Microsoft, SAPs, Volkswagen, Rolls-Royce, Mercedes, and so on and so forth. 85% of our tenants in the office space, maybe closer to 90%, are actually not Indian companies at all. They're international companies, so we do speak the language really well. We are able to cater to international needs within India. Later on this evening, before dinner, we're playing a short video about our group, and you'll see our parks, and I'm guaranteeing you'll have a difficult time believing that that's India. So you know, India is not the poster child that you're used to be seeing, which is sickness, disease, poverty, illness, and so on and so forth. It's a lot more than that. And we're very proud as Indians to talk about given any platform to talk about our country. So I'm going to start without further ado to give you a little bit background on India. So the Indian economy has been growing at 8.4% since 1991, which is only next to China. Our population is about 1.31 billion, growing at 1.3%, which is likely to be 1.7 billion later this century. Our life expectancy has gone up from 69 to 69 years, from 27 at the time of independence. Our literacy rate has gone up to 79%, from 17% at the time of independence. The Indian economy is currently at 2.25 trillion, growing at 6.75%. In terms of PPP, which is purchase power parity, we are currently at 8.7 trillion economy. India is the third largest economy in the world in terms of PPP. India has a forex reserve today of 368 billion US dollars. India is fiscally conservative with a debt to GDP ratio of only 69%. What does this mean? This means we only have 69% of the borrowing versus our GDP. Now, if you compare that with, say, China, China is at 260%. Let me not even begin talking about United States, United Kingdom, and certain parts of Europe. India's saving rate is about 31%, and the investment rate is about 34%. We're fairly conservative as people. We like to save our money and reinvest it. And what this tells you is that India will reach a $10 trillion economy by 2030. Now, there's plenty of capital available to invest and grow as a country. And there's a lot of action happening in India. You know, we're currently growing at about 8.9%. But let me talk a little more facts. So India's annual steel capacity today is about 100 million tons, which is the same as the United States. India's annual cement capacity is about 350 million tons, which is about 2.5 times that of the United States. India has a base of 1 billion mobile phones versus the US at about 350 million. So now that's a really important number. Why? Because most of our e-commerce transactions, and we're a heavily e-commerce dependent economy today over the last 5 years, happens on mobile phones and not computers. So, smartphones penetration is very high in India. India has a very young population. This is extremely important, and I'm going to talk about this for a couple of minutes. Just comparing it to the world, to the large countries of the world, the average working population in Japan is about 48. Western Europe is about 45. US is 40, China is 37. India is only 29. What does this mean? This means that the productive age group between 15 to 64, by 2020, 2/3 of the world's working population will be in India. I'll repeat that. 2/3 of the world's working population in the next 3 years will be in India. What does this mean? This means you can't ignore us. IT, ITES, BPOs are already outsourced heavily to India. Now, the next outsourcing to India would be industrial and manufacturing. And that's evident with the way our government is growing our industrial plans, which I'll touch upon in just a minute. The Indian middle class, which is the working population of India, is about 300 million people today, which is the same size of the United States. Now, this Indian middle class is growing fast and strong, and they are pushing up consumption demand. Now, when consumption demand of 300 million people in the landmass of India, which is the same size as the United States, is growing up, you can only imagine the warehousing needs, the manufacturing, the infrastructure, more places to live, more places to work, more places to eat, shop, everything is going up. So if I had to compare it, where maybe 40 years ago, where UK or US, the boom was, that boom today is happening in India. The number of Indians living in urban cities by 2030 is going to be about 600 million people. That's twice the size of the United States today. So 10 million people are roughly migrating to Indian cities every year from the rural areas. And if you put that in real estate terms, because we are in a real estate conference, the current size of the real estate market in India is $126 billion. Now, if 10 million people keep migrating just over the years, it's going to be growing by 7 times the real estate market over the coming years. The real estate supplies the second largest jobs in India today. By 2020, real estate will be the largest supplier of jobs, 75 million jobs just from real estate. So India has predominantly been an agricultural-based economy, and most of the jobs have come from farming. But that's changing really quickly. Again, that's with everything I just said. The number of startups in India are only second to the US. India has consistently been among the top 3 countries to attract foreign direct investments. Recently, India launched RERA, which is a real estate regulatory authority. Now, I want to touch on this because it's really important. You must have heard of corruption, governance, bureaucracy, slow-moving things. I mean, a lot of companies here have tried to come into India and have not been able to successfully move forward. Now, those days are behind us. The coming in of RERA really puts things on a transparent and accountable platform. So developers and clients and banks and financial institutions are now very much responsible. Otherwise, the penalty is zero business. They're literally thrown out of business. They can't work ever again. REITs have finally come to India. Embassy Group would be doing India's first REIT, hopefully later this year, along with Blackstone. And what does all this mean? This means there's a lot of policy level changes happening, obviously, to drive things. So the one big effort that's being made by the Indian government, which you must have heard of, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been pushing, is Make in India. So made in USA, made in Germany, made in UK has always been a brand, but Make in India has never been a very powerful brand. So our Prime Minister is pushing really hard for Make in India, and that is attracting a lot of FDI into the country. Skill India. We have 300 million young people who need to be trained how to work. These are basic skills of labor, skilled labor, computer literacy, and so on and so forth. So we launched a program called Skill India, and by 2022, we're going to be training 300 million people with these skill sets. What does that mean again? That means a huge labor force. Now, I heard a lot of discussions earlier today and earlier this week in the UK about labor being a very important part of your location selection for warehousing. Guess what? That's not even a discussion in India. We actually ran a study with CBRE about a year ago where we asked about 75 occupiers in industrial, preference of location based on multiple factors. Labor was one of them, proximity to customers, proximity to highway, and so on and so forth. And the labor was last on the list because the availability of good, skilled manpower was plenty. GST, so goods and services tax. Finally, India is launching One India, One Tax. This is really important because so far, India has been quite behind in the ease to do business. It's been a very complex tax structure. Moving goods between border A to border B has been a nightmare. And this is finally coming in effect July 1, 2017. So we're going into GST, which is really exciting for us, and that's going to be a big move. Now that again is attracting a lot of FDI, specifically in industrial and warehousing spaces. Digital India, again a big effort to digitize India, increase internet penetration, and so on and so forth. Smart Cities mission, we're launching 100 new smart cities across India, which is basically townships, smaller cities, which will be self-sustaining in terms of renewable energy, power, so on and so forth. And of course, recently India has relaxed its FDI policies, especially in real estate, to attract more foreign direct investment. So it's all about money flowing in, a lot of young people being there to work, plenty of cell phones around to order stuff on Amazon, and and the country is booming. Now, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure, because I think there are concerns in the room and outside, generally in Europe, as a perception about the Indian infrastructure, especially if any of you have visited our country recently and gotten stuck maybe in a Bangalore or Mumbai traffic for 2 hours from getting to the airport and back. You do think that, my God, how are we going to do business here? But just hang on. Infrastructure takes time to develop. A basic infrastructure project takes about 7 years to get off going anywhere in the world. But we're spending a lot of money there. So basically, as a share of our GDP, we're investing about 10% of our GDP back into infrastructure. Now, this is the highest in the world. If you look at all other countries, even China is at 9% of their GDP. United States is 2.4%, Japan is at 4%, Russia 1.3%, and Brazil 1.7%. So we spend 10% of what we make back into improving our infrastructure. In 2016, India was the top destination in the world to attract foreign direct investment. So we announced an investment of $62.3 billion in FDIs coming into India. These are institutional companies like Blackstone, Warburg Pincus, Brookfield, GIC, you name the players, and they're putting in real foreign money into India. A lot of this has been in real estate. If you compare this with the rest of the world, North America is 59 billion, China 56, United Kingdom 34, and Germany 10 billion. So we're getting a lot of money coming into India. I mean, this alone is a sign that the whole world is looking at us now, and we're very excited about that. Manufacturing. Manufacturing has always been a very important sector in India. As I spoke about Make in India just a minute ago, so I won't get back into that. But again, as a share of our GDP, manufacturing currently is at about 16% as a percentage of GDP. Now, if you compare that to China, China is at about 30%. So China is heavily a manufacturing-based economy. But by 2025, roughly, we aim to be at about 25% of our GDP in manufacturing. So there's a huge push. There's a host of Chinese companies, Japanese companies, corridors being made in India to push manufacturing up. Now, is that enough? Not really, because in manufacturing, it's all about competitiveness. It's all about how well you can produce. It's about how well you can buy, how well you can sell, how well you can ship, and how well you can transport. So this is all about, this is what manufacturing is, how cheaply you can buy your raw materials and how effectively and highest price you can sell it to your customer. Now, there is a ranking globally for the competitiveness index for manufacturing, and India is currently number 11 in that ranking, right? But we are aiming to be number 5 by 2020. So not only do we have a young working population, not only do we have plenty of money coming in, we can produce well. We can produce efficiently. So this is really important because otherwise it's not sustainable. Now, I mean, you're all experts in the room, so I'm not going to bore you with a lot of numbers on Indian warehousing market, but I think it's probably the first time we're discussing Indian real estate in this forum, so it's important for me to give some numbers. So that's a slide showing 2014 to 2018 real estate supply in million square feet, and those are real numbers out there. They're self-explanatory. But just to give you a gap, this is a study, by the way, of only 7 cities in India. There are 50 more which are not accounted for, right? So this is just the top 7 cities. You know, if you want to draw parallel to Europe, it would be maybe you know, Munich, London, Paris. So these are the top 7 cities, right? And the unmet demand today for warehousing grade A and grade B only is 3 million square meters in only these top 7 cities. So that's the opportunity, right? And we as a company today are, you know, we're fully funded by Warburg Pincus, Embassy Industrial Parks, so I run the business there, and we are building 2.5 million square meters of industrial space, all grade A. It's really important to note that over the last 2 years, we've been busy buying land, so we have now secured land of closer to that size, and we're going to continue buying land because that's, you know, as any developer would understand, land is the primary raw material for our business. So yeah, so that's roughly, you know, some very broad numbers on the Indian warehousing market. I hope I was within time. 3 minutes still left. This is good business. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.